Okay.
I've got small ears. So.
Okay, so can I move? Okay.
Do you really think you're going to listen?
Okay, that's.
Back to what's going to happen? Like,
I would like you to, because then you're going to show me that you're disciplined. Disciplined cadres of the movement. Okay, we've kind of touched on this already. So what's a currency? A currency is generally accepted form of money, including coins and notes. See, and that's not limited to coins and notes, it's including coins and notes, issued by a government and circulated in the economy. Okay, that's what currency is essentially. It's the things that you can use to buy with. Credit cards. What is that app? Why can't I remember what that app is called? Anyway. Huh? Yeah, Square is one of them, but it's not in the country yet. There's another one that's in the country yet. SnapScan. Okay. Okay, it's used as a medium of exchange of goods and services. It's that story I told about the exchange of money. So it stands in place of barter. So you don't have to exchange goods. You can exchange this thing that helps you buy these goods.
is it SnapScan or I don't know?
Currency, focus.
You just said SnapScan. So
No.
I'm trying to-
No, I'm saying currency. Sorry, I'm talking about currency. And then the currency is the basis for trade, right? Again, we've spoken about that. So what's an exchange? What are exchange rates? Exchange rates. An exchange rate is the price of one currency in terms of another currency. Okay, so the US dollar price of a rand, or the rand price of a dollar, is what I showed you there. Okay, cool. And it can be either fixed or floating. Fixed means the government says it's going to be 10 rand, and they buy up all the excess rands that are in the market, and they sell rands when there's an excess demand for it, so that it always stays at 10 rand. Floating is free for all. Wherever it sits, it sits.
Does any country use a fixed exchange rate?
China's got a semi-fixed story, so it's kind of pegged, but it's pegged to a basket in a weird, interesting way. And then Namibia and Lesotho and Swaziland are pegged to the rand. So there's Nam dollar, the Lesotho, no, Pula is Botswana, Maluti, I think it's Maluti, and Swati, I never remember that currency, so I'm going to walk away. They are pegged to one-to-one to the rand. We've got a common currency union with them. Okay. CPI versus inflation. So you'll hear this a lot, and people say CPI and inflation as if they are interchangeable. There can be, in a sense. CPI is the consumer price index. Okay. So they'll say inflation, we have an inflation rate of X, and the CPI, and so CPI. But people will tend to say the CPI is 5%. There's no such thing as CPI being 5%. Okay, CPI is an index from which we determine the inflation rate. Okay, so the consumer price index, it's essentially we take a basket of good and we take a base year. So we'll say this basket of good in 2010 cost 5 rand. Okay, and that 5 rand we take to be equal to 100. Okay, and then if next year it cost 5 rand or 5 cents, then it's a 10% increase, and that 100 becomes 110. Okay, and if the year before it cost 4 rand 90, you adjust that 100 to suit what the change is. Okay, and that change, so that's the CPI, that 100, 105, 95, whatever it is, that's the CPI, that's the index. Okay, and then the change from 100 to 105, 105 minus 100 over 100 gives you a percentage rate, and that percentage rate is the inflation rate. Okay, makes sense? And what we do is that we change the base year up every so often, because if you kept the base year at 1990, for example, it would look like we have an inflation of it would look like there's been a 2,000% increase in the CPI story. Okay, whereas that's not necessarily the story. Cool? Okay, so the inflation rate graph for South Africa from 1960 across to 2014. Is that not surprising to you? Why is it surprising?
1960.
Yeah, so that's 1960. That's 2014.
1996 was 96.
96.
Yeah.
Where is it?
86.
No, it's 80 something. 88 or something.
88. 18.
Yeah.
It's surprising when you think of the other graph, because the times when the rand was very strong and stable, inflation was very high.
Very good.
So what happened to the interest rates then if the inflation rate was that high in that period it was still stable on the other graph?
Yeah. The interest rate would have gone high as well. So they usually, if the inflation rate is high, they try and push interest rates higher to try and force it down. Because when you push interest rates high, the lending shrinks. And so when lending shrinks, there's less people buying stuff. And so the price increases, is not as bad as it would have been before. So another reason this is surprising is because our highest inflationary periods were before 94. But if you read the newspapers, you would swear like this is the worst inflationary era in the history of the country, right? And the worst we've had in democratic South Africa was 2007, 2008 at 11.5%. Okay, and the economy was booming at that time. The economy was, nobody would even have complained about that inflation rate at the time because the economy was at 5.5% growth. Yeah? And our lowest point, 2004, 1.4%, is almost as low as the lowest point we've had, almost historically. What's the point I'm making?
That we're obsessed about inflation right now.
That we should read behind the stuff that's in the headlines.
Absolutely.
Okay. Read behind the stuff that's in the headlines. There's more to it. There's always more to it. If you read our newspapers, you would swear the country is going to burn tomorrow. Like, we're going to die. Like, this economy is going to fall apart now. Yeah.
Why is it the case? Is it because maybe certain people' interests are being affected? But
No comment.
Who owns the media?
Okay, no comment. Okay, so we've dealt with the stuff that gets handled by the SARB. The second component. Should we take a 5-minute break?
Yes.
Comfort break, yeah. Okay. Let's do that.
Good job, so. Hey guys, before you go into break, can we just do vocab quickly? Can I have our honorable to remind us about vocab?
Oh wow.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Sorry, we don't have a. Okay. Okay.
Will you tell the license?
Okay, cool. I'll print it out because it's very hard to see from the back.
Okay. Okay, cool. Can everyone see? Alright. Who can say it? Who can say it? And the second one?
I actually have the second one.
Okay. And then besides the one that's here, how would you use it in a sentence?
Which one?
No, the first one.
Say the second one again.
How would you use it in a sentence? Hands, guys. Yeah. Sorry, what did you say? Uhwapilizo.
Say it again.
Uhwapilizo. Does anyone know what it means? How do you use it in a sentence?
Thanks so much.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. I'll do it now.
So do you use the libraries for books? Because bookstores are expensive.
I buy books.
See, that goes
That's actually how we did it.
I was actually doing this time.
Water and coffee.
No, I'm saying you will end up in
So you just need a booster to because like last investments are I can't see you don't get it here. You know, like I said, and they're paying. Like mine, they're trying to encourage the clients to keep a portion of the revenue so they need to push it. She's doing that. What they do is they have a board and that FNB has its subsidy. So it's not 100%. Islamic finance requires a certain margin. It's just so it's not 100%, but it's better than what's in it. Even if I was to say, do you know, just do it too, because how they get this. Exactly, yeah. That is not the way they so, I don't know, you either just keep setting it out, it's something you can do. What is that you, Mariam? How are you? Nothing bad today.
You know, the one time our babies and
a set aside I should still be able to share the management of the one it's that's in a business. What business do you do? I don't know any business, but I don't know.
but I think there.
I can help you with the family.
I think there.
Hello? Hello?
I didn't read the link. I just read the message and I want to ask you.
Hello?
And the other thing,
I don't mind.
So does it mean you have any unusual side?
Yeah, sure.
Today, I haven't had these.
Like 5 minutes, but not too very long.
I removed the vegetables.
It's funny that don't feel this way, that it's
Your boyfriend used me a picture. Boyfriend. I don't want to
Okay, can you get everybody back in here? Yeah. Ah, no, thanks, I'm good, yeah. Thanks, man, I appreciate it.
Come on, everybody.
Oh! So where are you from, Rodney? Where are you from? Where's home?
Oh, Eastern Cape.
Where? Eastern Cape. Where in the Eastern Cape?
Grahamstown.
Grahamstown? Sure. I don't know many black people from Grahamstown. Like almost everybody I know that's from Grahamstown is white.
It's funny, I know many black and white people in Grahamstown.
What school did you go to? Did you go to school in Grahamstown? Yeah, they also happen to be from private schools, I suppose. So, the guys, yeah, St. Andrews, yeah. I mean, I know black guys who went to school in Grahamstown, but I don't know them to be from Grahamstown.
Funny want to see school like
Okay.
the cheapest local schools.
What?
The cheapest local schools.
Yeah. Okay. So when did you move up here?
Last year.
Sorry, last year.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you go to Graham, what's it called? Rhodes. I was like, it's not called Grahamstown University. Studying? Management and economics. Okay. And what are you doing your honors in? Okay. Private finance. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Cool. Are we all back? You have to whistle.
When I made a mistake,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool.
what is actually because I've been searching it for.
I've got it somewhere. I'll give it to you. I've got. If you have a flash stick. Not now. I'll give it to you afterwards.
Okay,
if
yeah.
you have a flash stick, I've got like.
Can you email me?
Yeah, maybe I'll email it to you. But if you go to the SARS website, they've got a taxpayer information for like how much they're contributing, who's contributing. They've got all that stuff. Yeah, but I'll try and email it. Okay, woo! We are more than halfway, and we are not halfway with the slides. It's not a true reflection. Okay, let's get going.
Maybe for the purposes of the next session, you shouldn't take questions. Maybe just try.
Okay.
Like 5 minutes after the question.
Okay, sounds good. I'm happy to go that way. Except then, I want to hear your amazing opinions, guys. Okay, National Treasury. So the National Treasury is responsible for fiscal policy. Okay, and fiscal policy is basically government budgets and managing surpluses and deficits, and then the taxation policy. Okay, so contrary to what most people might think, SARS does not set the tax policy. Okay, they just collect the money. So every time the finance minister gives us his budget speech, what you hear there are the necessary changes in the tax policy, or the changes that they've made in the tax policies. Okay, so this year's big changes were in tax. Drum roll. Okay, I'm gonna move on, never mind. Okay, so there were no changes in income tax, so there were no changes in corporate tax. There were changes, sin taxes were obviously always smashed. But nothing major in the tax space really. There were no fireworks, as the economists at banks like to say. No, you can't. Okay.
When Papa Bonanza said that they're going to be decreasing the amount of flights that politicians are doing back, is that part of my tax, or is that just increasing the cost?
No, that's management of the government budget. Yeah, so I mean that's why you also spoke about getting rid of Cape Town, right? It's about managing the costs. Cool. And then, so their big thing is managing budget deficits and surpluses. So, should we spend more than we receive? So, budget deficit is, the budget balance is the difference between the amount of tax revenue they receive and the amount of money they spend. Okay. If they spend more than they receive, it's a deficit. If they spend less than what they receive, they have a surplus. Okay. And like I was saying, contrary to popular speak, deficits are not necessarily bad and surpluses are not necessarily good. It depends on where the economy is and what you're trying to achieve. Cool. The government budget from 1990, and this is in millions of rands. Okay, so in 1990, can you imagine being Nelson Mandela? Okay, you will come out of prison, you obviously don't know what the budget is. Okay. The budget for the South African government in 1990 was 73 billion rand. Okay, 73 billion rand. Okay, that's pitiful. That's chump change. Like, I don't even know how to explain how little that amount of money is. Okay. And then you're the ANC and you're like, we're getting into power! And you're like, okay, right, we're going to go into the government coffers and it's going to be good times. We're going to be able to do the things that we want to do for our people. And you get in there and your budget, so the amount of money that you're getting is 131 billion. Okay. And your debt is much higher than that. Okay. And it's debt that was put together essentially in an attempt to fight you and kill you, right? And that's where you find yourself. Okay, you've got 131 billion rand with which you must build houses, build schools, build roads which had not been maintained since the late 70s. There'd been no new university built since 1960, except unless we count Univen, which was built in 1982. Well, which was made at university in 1982. Okay, University of Venda. And the the schools were like only for white kids, and the schools for black kids were not where they were. They needed to be. So you've got no schools, you've got no roads, you've got no water, running water in people's homes. You've got no electricity in those homes. There's no. So clinics, health is a big problem. And all you have is 131 billion to try and solve those problems. This is the size of the challenge that government was faced with, that people don't understand and take for granted. Okay, it was huge. It was massive. And they've, with that starting point, managed to move things far forward. So in 94, electrification in the country is 5% of the country. It's now above 90, inching towards 95. Running water in homes, same story, 5%, it's now above 90, 95. Kids going to school, in 85, only 1 in 4 black South African children were in school. Now, basically every black child gets to go to school, and most of them for free. Okay, health, there were basically no clinics in townships. There's at least 1 clinic in almost every township in the country. So these are achievements that people will be like, oh, but South Africa's roads are some of the world's best roads, contrary to what 702 likes to say. Okay, you would swear like there's like. Have any of you? How many of you have driven outside of South Africa? Driven on the continent. Sorry, let's on the continent. What's your experience of those roads?
Africa.
Yeah, on the continent.
Yes, you stayed in Africa.
South Africa is much different.
Yeah. I drove in Morocco, and even in Morocco,
yeah,
South Africa's roads are much
better.
Yeah.
Morocco, Tunisia, same story. Please, let's not have that discussion. Ghana, TZ, Mozambique, Kenya, Nigeria. Like, I mean, Botswana is improving, but Swaziland's okay actually. Swaziland's roads are not bad. It's the roads off the national roads that are a little scary in Swaziland, but the main roads are pretty good. Lesotho also quite good. But even parts of the states, the roads are like scary. But that stuff, that kind of thing that you like, the achievement has been phenomenal. Anyway, and on top of that, they've also managed to put in a revenue collection system that's moved them from 131 billion to 1.1 trillion in a space of 20 years. I mean, that's remarkable. It's not a minor. So they've built an economy in which people have enough money to pay that amount of tax, and they're able to collect it. So Nigeria, for example, for all its size, has a budget that's smaller than South Africa because they can't collect it. It's a crazy thing. So the success of SARS is not a minor. It's a huge thing. It's a massive thing, and absolutely built by the ANC government. So it's not even like SARS was really good before. And no. Absolutely built by the ANC government, that system. So in your criticism of the ANC, which does a lot of crap things, don't get me wrong, you must bear these things in mind. They've actually, outside of the political achievements, Mandela is not such a bad guy. I know this generation likes to be like, he sold us out. Yeah, he did a couple of things wrong, like every leader. I absolutely think he did a couple of things wrong. But these guys have built a foundation on which the country can actually have a strong trajectory to go towards. And I'm not trying to get you to vote ANC either. Because if you're not voting ANC already,
you know.
It's an election year, I have to plug you. Come on. Okay, so what's GDP? The definition of a country's gross domestic product is the total value of all final goods and services that were produced within the borders of the country during that year. Okay, most people think GDP means the wealth of the country. It doesn't. Okay, GDP is everything that actually gets made and consumed in that, not all of it in that country, but it's all the things that gets produced in the country, whether for consumption locally or for export. So it's literally everything that's eaten and chowed during the course of the year. That's what your GDP reflects. Okay, so where South Africa's GDP is sitting at, we'll see now, like 3.4 trillion, the capital base of South Africa is closer to 7.2 trillion. And the capital base is the value of the assets in the country, physical assets. So now we're sitting at a place where it's a 2-to-1 relationship. Okay, we need 2 rand worth of assets to produce 1 rand worth of the GDP. I don't know if that's necessarily the most efficient ratio. I haven't looked at it, but there's something there. So we need to figure out what the best economy is, what the capital to GDP ratio is, and see if we can get ourselves there, if we're not there already. Okay, so the way you calculate GDP is that you say consumption, which is all the stuff that we buy and consume, services or goods, plus gross investment, which is the additional capital that we create. And I'm talking capital in the economic sense, like I said yesterday. So I'm not talking about money, I'm talking about machinery, roads, plus government spending. Okay, so the government budget that I just showed you now, expenditure on that, plus exports minus imports. Okay, so plus this bracket, so which is the trade balance. Okay, and the reason that's important is because it reflects the amount of money we've brought into the country less the amount of money that we've taken out of the country. Okay, everyone comfortable? Yeah. Cool. And I've made the point. It's not the same as the country's wealth. Okay, it just shows the country's production capacity. Cool. So at market prices, our GDP has looked like this over the years since 1946. Okay, they are graph things, they're just too small, right? So what do I mean at market prices? That's before outstripping the effects of inflation. Okay, so you can see that. It's about 3.5 trillion. GDP at market price in 2014 is worth about 3.5 trillion rand. Okay, and that's off a base of, let's just go at 94. 94, we were under 500 billion. So it's what's 35 divided by 5, 7. 7 times bigger than we were in 94. You would swear we've shrunk. Okay, that's at market prices. At 2010 prices, so this is stripping out the effects of inflation. Okay, so now we're saying real GDP. Okay, the real value of our GDP. 94, about 1.5, just above 1.5 billion trillion. And today, just over 3. Okay, so even in real terms, we've doubled the size of the economy in that time. Okay, and if you look at, so it's from 94 to 2014. Okay, let's say that's how long it's taken to double. Okay, if you look at before that, how long it would have taken to double, you're looking at 94, 1.5, so somewhere in the middle here, 64. From 1964 to 94, what's that?
30 years.
30 years. It took 30 years to double before that. Okay. So there are definitely some good things happening.
Sure.
I'm not going to tell you the bad stuff because I think you'll get that in the newspapers. Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm going to say, is there
Is the what?
GDP per capita that's going to be a problem?
I don't have that number here, but it's also grown significantly.
Yeah, I mean, currently the average income of the white individual was 15,000. For last 30, and for Africans it's actually times 10. So
Yeah.
1.5 to 15.
That's right.
But still, it's half what.
Yeah, it's half, but it's half versus having been a tenth before. So again, there are gains that people don't discuss there, right? So everyone will be like, black people are only earning half what white people are earning. but it's 10 times more, and it's now 50% versus 10% of what it was. Right? So there have been gains even on that front. It was never going to happen in one generation, the catch up. But 20 years is close to one generation, right? Like, it's a lot of work that's been done. And don't let me, anyway, okay, let's move on. So the two graphs you saw is nominal GDP, essentially, the market price one, versus real GDP, which was the 2010 prices one, okay? And the difference there is that nominal variables are those where the effects of inflation have not been taken out. Okay, so we just take the price as it was in that year, and we just put it in there, okay? Whereas real is those variables where the effects of inflation or price have been pulled out. So those movements in price have been pulled out to reflect a more kind of, if this was happening in that year, what would it look like? Okay, so you could have that graph look like that, but because inflation has been so bad, the GDP has actually just remained the same, has stagnated. But we saw now that that's not the case, okay? So the simplest example that we normally use is with interest rates. So real interest rates equals nominal interest rate less inflation. Okay, and the GDP growth rate that gets given out is normally the real growth rate. So it's growth after you've taken out inflation. Okay, everyone comfortable with that? Sure, we really are moving fast now. This is great. The business cycle. Okay, so what's the business cycle? The business cycle is a periodic but irregular up and down movement in economic activity. Okay, so it's basically that yo-yo kind of thing, right? So boom bust of economies across the world. So the global economy, and it's normally quite well reflected in the stock markets. So when the economy is growing, what you'll find is that the stock market will rise. When the economy shrinks, the stock market will shrink, and so on and so on. Okay, and it normally has 4 phases. It will expand, that's the first phase. Then it will reach its peak, okay, where it's now at the top, it's too hot. If you're really smart, you're selling at that point, your shares, your stock holdings, if you are able to notice what it is. And then contraction, which is basically coming back down, and then we get into the trough, which is the bottom of it. And then we start expanding again, peak, contracting, trough, in those 4 steps. Okay, a recession occurs if the contraction is severe enough. Okay, so different governments and different reserve banks tend to have different definitions of what a recession is, but the generally accepted one is 2 quarters of recession. Okay, 2 consecutive quarters of recession. So if your GDP contracts for 2 consecutive quarters, they say you're in a recession. Okay, and then a deep trough or is a slump or a depression. So if it just goes on forever and ever, then we're looking at a depression. I think the last real depression that we saw was 1929, to be honest. I mean, 2008 was bad, but it wasn't quite a depression. If you read, listen to, or see any pictures of the global economy in 1929 to like 1934, 35, you understand that we have not experienced a depression. It's quite bad. Like, people are queuing for bread in America. Like, it's that bad.
Wasn't it like that in Greece? I think they had mass suicide rates, I think, when pension funds were cut.
Yeah.
Maybe we didn't experience it, but
yeah, it wasn't a depression. So suicide rates of males tend to go up over that period when you have a depression, because males have their egos tied to how much money they make, myself included. And when you're faced with, man, I can't provide for my family, most males are like, I'd rather off myself. I don't know if South African males are the same though. The drug now. So it's okay. I get the sense that our oaks are gonna be like, well, you know.
I never.
Hey, hi boss, I lost my job. Yeah.
So I want to ask, like, what is the real world explanation for why we have the cycle?
It's humanity and madness. I mean, like.
So at like a microeconomic level, is there an explanation for why?
It's now called behavioral economics. So people, you know, like, I mean, the best thing is when your reception is telling you what stocks to buy, it's time to sell, right? It's that kind of thing. Like, it's like this mob herd mentality, right? Like, we have so much money, and then actually, like, the prices don't make sense anymore. Like, that's just too high. Like, and then everyone's like, oh no, the prices are too high. Then everybody sells at the same time. It's like, it's literally just herd mentality. Like, look, some of it can be explained by like your age structure of the economy. So when you have younger people, they'll tend to spend. So people between the ages of 20 and 35 will be building families, blah blah blah. So they don't save much and they spend a lot of money. So they will tends to be a consumption-led economic expansion, right? And as they get older, they save more, and then later begin to draw down on their savings. So that can partially explain that. So as the population gets older and older, the economy cools down.
So what time span is the 4 phases usually?
We don't have an answer for that right now. It's all speculative. But the stock market has a like 6 to 8 year story usually. So the global stock market will, and it's getting shorter and shorter, which is scary. But every 6 to 8 years, there's a boom bust cycle. So 2008, 2001, 98 or 97, no? Yeah, 2001, I can't remember. Yeah, but there's like every 6 to 8 years there's a boom bust, there's a bust.
So we're due for a bust.
Yeah, so we're due for a bust. We genuinely are.
On that note, what are the government interventions that help smooth out the cycle?
Yeah, they think they help, right? That's what government thinks. They're like, we are going to help, and
But
no,
you're saying no.
they never help. So QE, they've just screwed up the global economy. I don't know if we'll ever stop QE. Quantitative easing, sorry. Because, easing, sorry. So in 2008, when the world went crazy, so there's this theory. It's kind of called the helicopter theory, and this Keynes' approach to depressions, right? So when there's a depression or there's a recession in the economy, Keynes and this kind of helicopter approach says, go into the economy, give money to people, and they can go and buy themselves out of the recession, right? Now, the US government, with all their intelligence and whatever, thought, no, let's not give the money to the people, let's give the money to the businesses. Okay, and then also we'll buy bonds from the market because there was no liquidity in the market. Okay, so we buy bonds, but when you buy bonds, what you do is give money to investors, right? And they make up like 1% of the world economy, population. Okay, and so instead of people buying themselves out, what you've got is these few people get all the money. Okay, and yeah, sure, got the economy back and it's moving and it's filtered back, so GE and those guys are creating jobs, blah, blah. But the people who got the money and are still getting the money now it's like a drug now. Okay, now it's like every time the government is like, okay, we're going to stop giving you guys money, they're like, no. And you see the stock market just tank, and then the government's like, stock market is tanking. And then they put more money in. So we're now in a world where the government is just, and the ECB's done the same. Japan's tried to do the same. China somewhat, but China is a third place, right? Because they'll just tell you, like, stop it. We've had enough of your nonsense. But all these different reserve banks have tried to do that. And so every time they try to pull the money out, the investors just tank the stock market, and governments panic for whatever reason when the stock market tanks. So that's what I don't know how the economics fundamentals work going forward in a space where QE is now a permanent feature, right? and it's not new because Roosevelt did a similar thing, right, in 29, but he put a lot of the money into the real economy as opposed to the stock market itself. So they went and built roads and built this, so which was supposed to be the approach that Obama was going to take, right? The infrastructure, road and electricity grid kind of refurbishment process. But very little of the money ended up going that way, and a lot of the money ended up going into the stock market. So it's like they've changed the script a little bit, and it's gone a bit haywire.
Just want to say that part of the reasons that causes contraction after the peak is that during the peak, stability creates people to innovate with financial features and take risks.
Yeah. So now you have derivatives of derivatives.
Yes.
So a derivative, I don't know if you guys know, but a derivative tool, what do I call it? A derivative is basically you buying something with an asset behind it. Okay, you're not buying the asset itself. Okay, so when I buy into, for example, when I buy gold futures, okay, I'm not buying the gold, but I am buying the futures on the basis of what the price of the gold thing is going to be. Okay, now a derivative of a derivative is now I'm buying this thing on the basis of what the future is going to do, which is being bought on the basis of what the gold is going to do. Okay, now you're like, what the is going on there? So now, obviously, we're like, oh, what are we tracking? The gold, or are we tracking the future? What's happening? So that creativity leads to now, I mean, where do we go from here? So 2008, what we saw was there are these mortgage-backed derivatives, and what they do is there's all of you in here have a mortgage or a bond, and we put all of your mortgages together and your repayments together, and I buy this thing over here which says my income will come based on how much your repayments are, so that if one of you guys defaults on your mortgage, it doesn't too badly impact my income stream. Okay, so that was where it was. Okay, they moved it to one step over here. So now they took those mortgages that are together, which are badly rated so you 30 don't really have a good credit score. We found another 30 people who don't have a good credit score as a 30, and another 30 people. And we took this thing that's over here, put them together, and then we sold those things together as something else over here. So when the mortgages over here fall apart, this guy's guaranteed access to your homes, but I don't have anything backing my income stream. And so when this falls apart, because AIG and are all exposed to this, the economy falls apart. That's like the simplest way to try and explain that. Yeah. They said I mustn't take questions, but now I'm taking questions. Yeah.
Taking from what Tony said, I'm wondering what is happening to us, what is happening to this country. Why is there creativity happening, or is just that, I don't know.
I'm not going to answer that. Okay. Okay. Cool. So, business cycle. This is not quite a business cycle. What I try to do here is just show using the gold, platinum, and Brent crude prices how it would happen. So you can almost see, like, but with these it's not even like a 6 or 8 year story. There's like ups and downs all the time, you know, and then for whatever reason we had this prolonged period of the price rises, right? And it was like the resource boom, right? And now, I don't know if you look at the graph for 2015, 2016, Brent crude, so this here is for Brent crude, which is the red line. Okay, so it went
at like 25.
Now it's at like 25, just breached 30 or 40 for the first time. I think it just breached 40 yesterday for the first time since December. But now it's come all the way down to here and has now kind of come back up to 40-ish. Okay, and then platinum, which the green line, okay, along with gold, we're like touching 1,600. I mean, platinum touched 2,000 at some point. Has come all the way down back to 1,000. Okay, and at some point it was at 800 and something. So it's a cycle that you see, like boom, bust, and the length of it differs, right? So one could argue that there was a boom, bust there, okay, then there, and then there's a bit, and then we start going up, and now we're back down, and then we don't know how long, and we don't know how long that contraction is going to be. And a big chunk of this year is because of China.
Did gold drop as well in that? Is it fine?
Yeah, the gold also dropped. It's also, but it's now come up to phones off. But gold has risen a little higher than platinum. So platinum is at 1,000, gold is like 1,200 or 1,400. I can't remember which one it is. But it's all. But gold also has that property of being the, what do they call it? Safe haven. So when the economy is jittery, people tend to flock to gold. And so the price of gold tends to stay highish in bad times. Okay. So yeah, so this period here is mainly because China is just buying everything up. Everything. So the price of iron ore went up yesterday by 19% in one day or something. All of it because China announced they're going to try and keep economic growth between 6.5 and 7%, whereas everybody was expecting it to be just at around 6.5%. So resources yesterday were rallying. I mean, Kumba's share price went up by like 33% one day because they are in iron ore. Okay, so China's had a huge role to play there. But China also builds ghost cities, right? They're like, build them and they will come. Yeah, it's an actual government policy, which is scary. Yeah, so they're like empty cities chilling in China because they built them. Okay, so that's kind of how the cycle works. Okay, and then the big bad stock exchange. So what's a stock exchange? It's a market in which shares of publicly held companies are issued and traded. Okay, so basically, if I want to list my company, I go to the stock market, I list it, and then once I've listed it, there are shares out there in the world, and people can buy and sell those shares. Yeah.
Can I go out personally and buy those shares, or do I have to have a broker with me?
I've got a half enough answer for you. The answer is half yes, half no. Okay, so you can open up a Standard Bank trading account, and you decide which ones to buy, but the Standard Bank team goes and actually executes the trade for you. So you can't execute the trade yourself directly, but you tell them what to buy and at what price.
How much, like, can you, like, just speaking, like, for us, can you buy a share for 500 rand or 1,000?
Yeah, so that's why I was saying go with Satrix, because Satrix will allow you to buy at that level. The cost structure is low enough for them to be able to, you just put $500 a month in there, and they will ensure that you get like the all share index bought for you at that price for cheap enough. Whereas
yield income in 6 months, like let's say in 6 months we could get like 6,000 rand back. Is that possible?
No, that's not how it works. We should have a lecture on the stock market. Yeah. You must ask the mayor to pay me for that. No, not quite. So the stock market, you're always playing for the long term. It's in your best interest to play for the long term. So you must put money in there that you are happy to just ignore for a couple of years, because then they get dividends in and the price in the stock prices grows, and then that's how you become rich. So I didn't put this thing in here, but I'll show you with the next slide. If you want to go in and out of the market, you lose money just on the charges. Forget anything else. So with the Standard Bank trading platform, for example, if you buy shares for less than 14,000, like on any one trade, you're losing more money than you should be, for example. So you have to be thinking long term, is my best advice in that space. Is that a stock market question?
Yes, I actually want to ask about forex trading.
Forex trading
Yes.
is very bad for people who are not professionals.
Okay, and I want to know, if you're not a professional, then what other way? Because I really think it's smart investment, but at the same time, if you're not experienced, like how do you get then someone?
First of all, forex trading is not investment. Okay, it's trading. Okay, so you're literally in and out of the market all the time. Why? Because There's nothing to tell you what the underlying value of a currency is. Really, it depends on demand, what people feel today, whether JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs will decide to smash the rand or not. So you almost always just looking for an opportunity to buy low, sell high. Okay, so it's not an investment vehicle at all. So that's what I'm saying. You better be just a professional trader, and not just a professional trader, a professional forex trader, for you to be able to know how to make money in that space. And it's possible. You can put in your 10,000 hours and become that guy or that girl. But for the layman, I advise that you stay away from that space.
The reason I say it's an investment is because I know people who have taken whatever return they've gotten and invested in it. That's why.
Yeah, but you have to be able to make the return. Yeah, that's the thing.
Do you buy an employer, a trader?
Why is everybody telling their page at the same time?
You play a trader for what? And how much is it? Or does you just do it yourself?
My personal advice with forex is that you must stay away from it. Stay away from forex. It's hard. It burns. Like you will burn and it will hurt. And losing money always hurts more than actually getting money. Even if I give you $2 million today and you lost 2,000 tomorrow, it will hurt more losing the 2,000 than the amount of joy you experience getting 2 million. It's a remarkable truth about this stuff. I don't know why. It just hurts more. And you're going to lose much more than you'll make in the forex market. It's like playing the lottery if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Basically. Was there a hand? No. Okay. Okay, so the JSE itself, so the gold line is the movement of the stock exchange. And you see that 2008 period we had a bit of a wobble, right? It crashed quite nicely. But what you can see, so the black dotted line is the trend. What you see is that it generally just goes up, but you have to be patient. You must just be willing to keep your money in there. So don't make dumb buys, and dumb buys are trying to speculate about company X is going to do phenomenal things. And you can just do research properly and know this company has XYZ qualities, and I know that this industry is going to do well, and they go and do that. But it's good enough to just buy the all share and just hold. The all share is basically an index that is made up of the top 100 companies, because they represent something like 90 to 95% of the stock exchange, of the JSE. And so the way they grow will generally mimic the way the stock exchange as a whole grows. Yeah. Okay. So it's better to just buy pieces of Satrix all share, a Satrix top 40. Buy that on a frequent enough basis, and your money will have money babies, and it'll do this. Okay. So the stock exchange, the returns, for example, 2014 as a year, which was considered a bad year. I think 2015 was probably worse. I can't remember what the number is. Returned 10.8%. Okay. Between 2009 and 2014, the stock exchange returned 18.5% per annum on average. Okay. 10-year average. So from 2004 to 2014, it returned 17.8% per year on average. And this is with boom bust, right? But on average, it returned 17.8%. 15-year average was 15.2, 18-year average was 13.4%. Now, it sounds like a little bit, but how much are you getting on your savings account in the bank? Okay, now, if you now compound that as opposed to simple interest, so now you're growing interest on interest, your returns just, they go crazy. You get really rich really quickly. So, it's not quickly, it's over a couple of years, but it's a good space to play. I especially think that a lot of black people are not in that space. And it's definitely worth it. It's almost as good as insurance, right? Because when you die, you can transfer this to whoever follows. Okay, this is the juicy bit. We've got 30 minutes.
Yay.
Yeah, okay, let's do this. So is everybody comfortable with the JSE as a...
I have to ask, which is, because I'm very be interested in one day buying a share somewhere, but
Yeah.
which is one of the best companies that you know, even if they are in a crisis, you get some sort of return.
You know, now I have to read a whole, what is it? This advice is not what. I'm not allowed to tell you that, just because if you go and execute that and you get burnt, I'm gonna
No, just give me like
die.
say three companies.
I know.
It's illegal.
I'm saying that it's illegal. I can't. Yeah. I physically can't, because I'm playing in a financial advisor role, which will actually get me into trouble. And you have witnesses who can say, he definitely said. And I'm on record.
Could you speak in my company? Could you speak just briefly on the economic or the financial policies and policy instruments that have been used to protect consumers? So the Consumer Protection Act kind of speaks towards this. So, and to prevent those bad loans being taken out, the steps that the government has taken to kind of protect people.
Yeah. You know, the problem with the lawmaking process is that it gets lobbied, right? So almost always you'll find that almost every law is built with a loophole, or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10. So the Consumer Protection Act, for all its great aspirations, has loopholes that allow people to charge up to 32% interest.
But they have to tell you about it.
But they have to tell you about it. But then what? Okay, now you've told me about it, and then what? And if I haven't really gone to school and I don't actually know what that means, what you probably should be telling me is, I'm giving you 100 Rand today, and I'm going to expect you to pay me 32 bucks every year in order for you to take this 100 bucks for the next 5 years. And maybe at the end of that 5 years, I'm going to ask you for that 100 bucks back, but more often than not, I'm just going to keep you paying me 32 bucks. And over that 5 years of 32 bucks paying, you will have paid me 150 Rand, 160 Rand, to be specific, to be exact, for the 100 Rand that I give you. That's what they should tell people. But telling my grandma that she's paying 32% on interest, and she's just like, oh, okay, cool. So that in itself is a loophole, right?
So the act doesn't go far enough?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, the growth of Capitec is evidence of that. And I own Capitec stocks, hint, hint. But yeah, and in the absence of a different law that makes Capitec have to do more things, Capitec will probably keep growing. Also because none of the other banks have any idea how to play in that space. They just have no clue. They keep burning themselves every time they try.
But I'm just thinking about how it's interesting how a lot of our policies are influenced by economic policies.
Okay.
So especially like in the case of you have globalization, and how the World Bank and IMF has pretty much has a firm grip on educational policy, especially in developing countries.
Okay.
Because they're always like, there's this thing where they tell, not explicitly, but they encourage governments not to spend, not to embark on public spending, which also results in not putting enough money on education. So you find that like a lot of our education policies, especially here in South Africa, are finance driven. Not really interested in terms of equity. They're not really interested in addressing inequity or perhaps bridging the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much you're having a system that is perpetually and consistently reproducing itself, where wealth is still staying in one particular corner of society, and one society is still being marginalized and also like pervasively deprived of economic emancipation. So I'm just like thinking how it's interesting how things are never really neutral, and it's always helpful to look at economic policies, but also in a grand scheme of things.
Sure.
And look at how they tend to also like proliferate or have an impact on our educational policies. Which is,
So what you're referring to is the capture of power, right? So who holds the power? That's the question. And if you think about it just logically, and I say logically because I'm struggling with that concept right now, but let's just use the word because it makes sense. If I have power, I'm not going to give it to you just because you asked for it. Okay, I'm almost always going to fight you tooth and nail to the death for you to take that power back, or to take that power from me. Okay, so, and more often than not, everything that I'm going to do is going to be an attempt to reconfirm, reestablish, whatever it is, my power in that space. And so those who are trying to take power away, I mean, Mugabe said a phenomenal thing the other day, right? Not the other day, a couple of months, maybe years ago. He said when this thing with Grace and Mujuru was happening at the ZANU-PF Congress, he said to them, "You guys think I'm going to give you power? Are you out of your minds? You must come and take the power if you want the power. And if you have the balls to come and take the power, then I'll know that it's time." Okay. That's essentially the story of economics in the world, right? Because economics and politics are like one thing. But when you're in a position of weakness, unless you know that you can bulldoze your way into power, you need to be creative about how you take that power away. Okay. So simple things like South Africa's history textbooks need a charger. South Africa's history textbooks still tell the story of Jan van Riebeeck as if he discovered South Africa, and Livingstone discovered Victoria Falls. I mean, like, what the fuck is discovering? Like, if you were taken by the locals to the falls so you could see them, how do we now say you discovered that stuff, right? But it's as simple as the wording of that stuff. Like, so you could say Livingstone was the first European to see the falls, okay? And we saw a remarkable thing. So I was at the Midlands this weekend, okay, with my wife, okay, and we bought the map, okay, of the Midlands Meander. And they say phenomenal things like, one, the founders of the Midlands Meander are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 white people. I was like, what? And they founded it in 87. Huh? What the hell does that even mean? Okay, one. Two, they say what are those falls called? No, the Midmar Falls or something. Yeah, I can't remember what the name is. Commonly known by the Zulu people as the whatever falls in the Zulu name. I bet you right now that Zulu name's been around longer than the Midmar Falls, right? And what it should actually be is the Zulu name falls, known by the whites who came later as. But just the structure there puts power in one corner in a way. So it makes it look like the Zulu name is a side thing. Yeah, it's a side thing that's kind of happening because these guys can't say or whatever it is. Whereas if you switch that, so who writes our history textbooks? I mean, I bet you now it's not a black company, right? And the question to government is, why is it not a black company writing South Africa's history textbooks? I think it is Penguin, right? And Penguin's been doing this forever. So yeah, sure, there's a power in whatever that wants things to go this way, but there are little things that you can do to just strip away stuff, like stop making Shaka look like he was crazy. Like Shaka was doing exactly what Alexander the Great was doing exactly what Genghis Khan was doing. But it's this story. But even with Genghis Khan and Alexander, right? Alexander is called Alexander the Great. Khan is like this murderous, raping, pillaging, evil guy. Whereas I swear, if you read their histories and took the names out, it is mirror images of each other. It's like unbelievable. So it's those subtle powers that people need to tap into. Yeah.
And maybe just say a little bit about it. Just say the other inherent problem with economics and study has been the idea that it's always used as the only thing that could define development. I think having done maybe developmental politics, you understand that culture could also play a big role in defining development. So I mean, in the instance, we were not to just look at the economics module versus the graphs, in defining how far we've come, I think, as a country. We would, I think, be at a space where we would understand that actually we've come even more further than just the economical and numeric definition of development.
What are you defining as development?
I think partly, and just progress, whatever falls within that space, I do not think should be just economics.
No, don't answer that. That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you for a definition of development.
I think development is saying at a certain space or at a certain point, and this is how far we've moved from that starting point.
Okay.
And I think everything that could define the shift from that starting point to where point B is should be considered around the parameters of development. But what we, I think, initially have been doing in Africa for a very long time is only using economics and economic growth as then a measure of this is how far developed we are, which then leads us to having to adopt like the modernization theory, I think, to maybe develop ourselves even further, and that automatically means, again, it's an aspiration towards whiteness, and what historically white societies or white countries have been doing to, I think, to succeed or to grow, for lack of a better.
I've got two hands, okay?
I just want to say something about what you're saying, that when you study development economics, things you're asking first is how do you define well-being?
Yeah.
Is well-being having money and having buildings, and having iPhones? Is well-being having, being able to be a person who that you live is well-being health? Well-being education is how we define education. So and
education is culture.
Yes. So I'm saying, whenever people say to me, Europeans say to me, like, before our ship came, you knew what a ship was. We were succeeding within our definition of what well-being was. We were healthy. It was what we believed health was, and our medicine was. Our education was what it was. And so, according to those parameters of well-being, we had, developed. We were developed people, and there were millions of us. So clearly, we are thriving people. So now we find ourselves where we are accustomed to globalization, and how we define well-being as well has changed as well. So now we need to negotiate the fact that we are in the globalized world. So how do we then, as South Africans, define what it means for us to be developed, to be do we define it exclusively in terms of economics? You're asking, or our education is it properly decolonized? Is it really our education? How is our health systems? How is our are we well? So I'm competing with you.
Okay.
I think for me, like the biggest problem, I'm not really a fan of economics, and there are many reasons why I'm not a fan. But I just feel like most people, and it's not like. Sometimes on social media, sometimes like on person-to-person contact. I feel like economic students, law students, medicine students are one of the most arrogant students I've ever come across. Because there's always a tendency of making their knowledge so esoteric and so scientific, and that's so immune to dissent. And there's always this explanation that, no, I'm studying economics, so therefore what I'm studying is immune to disputes. What I'm saying is factual. What I'm saying is scientifically proven to be true.
If you have any friends that think that economics, law, and medicine are scientific, they're not smart.
So I'm just talking from my experience.
No, you must tell them that. You must tell them that they're not smart if they think that they're.
And also, I think it would have been interesting to perhaps look at economics from an African perspective. Because I feel like with the whole issue of psychology and philosophy, we tend to think that those are white man inventions. But in essence, psychology and philosophy are African inventions. They started in Africa. Psychology is an African discipline. Philosophy is also African by origin. So I'm just I'm always very uncomfortable when we talk about these things, and there's always this gratification of whiteness as the epitome of development, or whiteness as this amazing body of knowledge that came and saved us and gave us these formal and these wonderful definitions of what development is, and the whole concept of economics. I mean, the examples that we get, even from yesterday's lecture when we had the history of economics, which was presented by a white guy who was talking about slavery, but that's another point for another day. And then you have these white countries, and we talk of economics from a white and Western perspective, which is very problematic, because I don't feel like I don't think it's relevant to our context. So I'm just wondering, where are the African economists? Where is the African literature? Where is African history and African perspective of economics as a concept?
So let me challenge you. I'll take your hand in a moment. Let me challenge the three of you for a second. What if I told you that your reservations are based on your ignorance? On your ignorance? Okay. So your knowledge is that philosophy and psychology are of African origin, right? What if I told you that economics is from African origin? Right. So what if I told you that the richest man in the history of mankind was African? Right? Why not? Because it's available. It's in books. Right? So what if I told you that trade, by and large, originated in Africa? So what now is your perception of economics after that?
I mean, it's still, I think, inherently white supremacist in that it's still, I mean, it's beautiful. Part of the stuff I've never heard before. I did economics and capacity for 2 years. And obviously, because of, I think how it's packaged in as a study was a discipline, it inherently says to the Black African community, catch up to a white.
But what did I say to you when we started, even yesterday?
Why would you start with academics?
That's always the
You can, and there's studying one in the Free State and
I
Mpumalanga.
always say that, eh?
And what makes Forte not a black university?
No,
So
that's fine.
so then one of the questions, guys, okay, yeah. So one of the questions, and I'm going to take her before I take you guys again. So one of the questions, definitions that you need to come up with is what the hell is whiteness versus what's blackness. Okay. So what if I told you that the only thing that defines me as black is my color? What do you say to me then? What else makes me black?
The experience, or at least the idea that, and then this is your truth. This is your truth.
Yeah, tell me, what else makes me black?
I will never
That's fine. What else makes me black?
In the instance, you were to ask me what makes me black beyond the skin color,
Yeah.
I will tell you it's the experience. And this experience transcends.
What experience? What experience?
The experience of, I think, a violent history. The experience of knowing that I'll get into certain spaces and the skin color will not be just trying something that is unscientific. It becomes a reality.
So what do we do with white people who've had violent histories? Are they black? No. I mean, let's at an individual level. So what if there's a white person whose family has been taken through a violent history?
What do you mean violent history?
What about Palestine? Now, Palestine is black.
They're not white.
They're not white. No, but they're not black, right? No, they're not black. Are they?
But they're people of color.
So, okay. So people of color, anything that's not white, is what we're saying. Okay. So let's take, for example, Australians who were taken from England, taken to live in Australia because they were prisoners and had to work as laborers there, and have come from what they were to what they are today.
Are those
No. The white people.
White people.
Yeah.
And Jews.
And the Jews.
But then that's white on white.
Oh, so it's okay if it's white on white?
No, I didn't say it's okay. I didn't say it's
But
okay.
what we're saying is that this story, and which is why I'm thinking even now you have to think through the examples. It's because of in very specific white communities. In the black community, the story of violence has is a general story.
So that's what makes you black. That your people are generally.
And no, even the idea that I get to experience blackness each and every time. I might have thought that maybe before going to university, that as perhaps it was prescribed that get an education or get a degree, and then your experiences will be just a bit better.
Okay, you're not.
They are in the broader.
You're not answering my question. I'm asking you what makes you black. I'm not asking you what your experience of life is like because you're black. I'm asking you what makes you black.
I mean, of course, the only, I think, answer to that would be, and which is the answer I'm assuming that you're expecting from me.
No, I'm not expecting anything from you.
It's not scientific.
I'm not expecting anything from you.
Let me just speak something else.
I'm not expecting anything from you. I'm asking you what makes you black.
What makes you?
So, because then you can say what makes someone white.
I am black.
Blackness is biological.
So that's all it is. It's about this color of your skin.
No, it's not necessarily color. It's just it's born. You're born. You don't get to identify as black. You don't get to choose to be black. Blackness is not a choice. Like you don't just I actually feel like.
Does the same apply to whiteness?
What do you mean?
No, I mean, can you choose to be white?
No, you can't choose to be white.
So both sides are biological accidents or lotteries.
No, blackness is an accident.
Oh. I said both.
Oh. Hey.
Okay, let me take her first. Yeah. Before.
That was a poem.
I wanted to respond to what Thulani said earlier.
Yeah.
As a lawyer, we spend a lot of time arguing about facts and what is factual and what is not. And ideologies in law are not clear at all, and that's why we study it. Otherwise, anyone can pick up a textbook and go ABC, like go to court now. Also,
you also wouldn't need court cases, right? If it was that clear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We wouldn't argue about stuff
Yeah.
that was so clear. It made me laugh now. But also just the institution I study now, the School of Oriental and African Studies, where they particularly have an interest in Middle Eastern culture, in Asian culture, in African culture. We learned a lot about the different laws that exist in Africa, Asia, whatnot. So African customary laws and traditions, and even I did a module on law and development, and we did look at sort of alternative models to the Western ideology. So I'm just saying that it is out there, but because of how history has been in promoting Western culture, Western ideology, we're only seeing these things now. But people are writing about it. They've been writing about it for centuries. We just haven't read it. So yeah.
And so the point I was making earlier around creativity for those in a position of weakness and taking power back becomes important, right? So the first step you take as a person in weakness is to understand, to know firstly, and to understand, and then you know how to change the game, right? So if you keep coming and saying economics is a white thing, it means you've bought into the Kool-Aid yourself. You are being told that this is a white superior field which is built by and mastered by white people, when the truth might not be the case, but you haven't taken the time to investigate, right? So I said to you earlier, you guys, Carnegie, Rockefeller, Ford were in our recent history the richest people. Not one of you disputed that. Not one of you. And it's false. It's not true. So there's Queen Sheba, there's the Mali king that I was talking about, there's Solomon, who's not white, right? Who's an actual historical figure, forget the biblical stuff. And you all just took that, yeah, absolutely, Carnegie, Ford, and Rockefeller were the richest people. Sure, but Sheba is within that space, the Mali guy is within that space. And so now you're like, so essentially you've all gone and said, I'm accepting what I'm being told as the truth, and I'm going to base my experiences in life off of that. Okay, so South Africa and mining, for example, right, for all intents and purposes, gold and diamonds were discovered in 18 whatever, okay, except there was Mapungubwe like 1,000 years ago. They were mining and trading gold 1,000 years ago. Okay, there's iron ore in Tarazimbi. It was being mined and traded 500 years ago. So South Africa has a history of mining running right through its blood. But what's happened is that you've bought into this idea that mining was brought to South Africa by white people, as opposed to looking at what the historical facts are. So trade, I mean, these guys in Mapungubwe were trading with Queen Sheba, who was up in northern Africa. And in those times, they were trading with Arabs who were coming down that side. So there was some economic structure there which involved money, because we know that gold was being used as money, right? So knowing firstly those things, understanding those things, and maybe looking at whether that structure fits into the current economic system or not, and how it differs or how it can be improved, becomes the way you begin to think about it. But if you just drink the Kool-Aid, all you do is rebel. And it's almost pointless rebellion, because it won't change anything. Sorry, he had his hand up first. Yeah, go for it. Did you have your hand up?
It's very interesting when you started off with, which is an actually approach that I'm beginning to understand and beginning to be passionate about, the definitions and going back to the beginning of it. Now, when we look at let's speak about Europe, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that there's nothing wrong with say that in 1800 what they discovered, or let me say, there's nothing wrong with in the textbook it says 18 something, or what you call this, what you call diamond was discovered in Kimberley, for instance. Why? Because once upon a time, Europe was in a medieval state. Was this what you call dark ages of Europe, right?
Yeah.
Because it just indicates that this is when Europe just woke up. This is when Europe began to realize and see things. Yeah. And for them, yes, it's true. But now, how obviously the perception becomes a problem. The assumptions becomes a problem, and the way in which what you call this, the presentation of the story becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of other facts which are hidden. That they don't say 1860. For us, we did not know that there was gold or maybe there was diamond here until 1860.
Yeah.
They just leave it as 1860. Diamond was discovered. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and if I'm them, I'm doing the same thing. Believe you me, I'm also making myself feel superior.
So the very good part of dealing with issues is also the approach of issues. You should not be necessarily antagonized or maybe feel what you call this shaken by these things. Because I mean we know
your truth.
What you are saying, what you're speaking about the Mapumbukwe and all these other trades going on about.
Yeah.
I mean we know these things have been there. So why do we have to worry about the 1860 stuff?
Well, firstly, for me, it's just about correcting the story.
Yes.
So you must have an accurate story being told. So I think that's what's important. That's why I would change the telling of those histories, because you're just not telling the truth. Okay, and it's very deliberately structured to make someone look better than another person. Whereas if you give the facts, I get to make the call on who's better and who's not. Okay, so the fact that we lost sight of that stuff as Africans is also an indictment on Africans. It's not a minor thing. Like, we should have built off the foundations that were in place to begin with, and got it. And maybe you're right. Maybe we decided this is not how we want to go. It's just not healthy. We want to go this other way. But we need to know that to be the case, that there was a conscious choice around this is not how we want to go. We want to go the other way, as opposed to the decision was almost taken out of our hands. But you need a proper presentation of the facts in order to be able to make those kind of calls. But yeah, you have to do the reading. Go first. Yeah.
And with Africa, with black people, you see, there is. I don't know if it's even correct to say this, but this is how I understand it. This is how I look at it. There is black people and there's Africans.
Whoa. Okay.
I understand, right?
I don't, but continue. What's the difference?
Continue. I think I've broken a good ice.
What's the difference?
The difference is when you define the people with the color of the skin in the continent, we're not all black.
Okay.
So we have North Africa, which has a very long history of non-black people with the skin, right? So when we're speaking of Africans,
so by non-black, I assume you mean anything lighter than me.
With the skin.
Well, no, I'm saying so you're saying people lighter than you and I.
Okay. Let me be precise, because there is what you call this. There is what the definition, or maybe the term that is called third world. The third world, you find the Asians, you find the what you call this Brazilians. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They are non-white, and all of them are like somehow, there's black people, and then you understand.
Yeah.
And then there's Asians, etc., etc. So when I say that not every African is necessarily black with skin, I mean that every African, there's like the whole third world here in Africa.
Okay.
Non-white people who are African.
So you are defining African as geographic?
No, actually, let me just get to my point.
Okay.
My point is, it's quite, when we say as Africans, this is our experience. It includes everybody else. And then we have to be conscious about everybody else in terms of their, what you call the history of Egypt, the history of North Africa, etc. But when we say as black people, then we are being more specific.
Sub-Saharan Africa.
You understand what I'm saying? So I don't know if that also sits well, but
what about West Africa and
it's also sub-Saharan. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm done, I think.
Please come back.
You have to tell your people. Sorry, just last two things. So I was going to go and try and define communism and socialism and capitalism and regulation.
Can you not come back? Please.
I'm not the...
I'm listening.
Yes. Yeah, I hope you talk about
So you're, I mean...
Wasn't this supposed to be a technical conversation?
It was technical for a long time. Yeah.
Sorry, there was a question over here.
It was more about just the question of like blackness and whiteness that you were asking. I think, so I think this is from way back before, but that the terms are slippery because whiteness has changes by context. So one time Irish people weren't white because they were being defined in opposition to another community, and then as more people came to different environments, then they became white. So it's you can't just say it's a skin.
Yeah, and Jewish people for a long time in their history were not white, right?
Yeah.
And then they moved to Russia and became white. So
it's a point from far before the conversation.
Yeah. And I think there's a need to separate whiteness versus privilege, right? Or
it's like this.
No, I'm not. No, listen. Okay. So especially in South Africa, privilege tends to have the face of whiteness, or white people, right? So most people with money and comfort are white, but it's not just people who are white who have. So Motsepe's son went to Michael House. Michael House cost 220,000 rand a year. Is he not privileged because he's black? And his father used to fly him in and out of school in a helicopter every weekend. Is he not privileged?
How many of those do you get in terms of how many white people do you get?
So that unless you missed what I just said before that, I said in South Africa you generally have white people in the space of privilege, but it's not just white people in the space of privilege. And so I'm saying there is being white and being black based on how I look or whatever it is, and then there is the privileges I enjoy as a person based on my life and my parents and all those kinds of things. And there's a conversation there to be had. And if we're not having the conversation, we're probably robbing ourselves of actually finding the real problems and how to solve those. But that's a...
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah. How did it go?
Cool. Was right, yeah.